I love this song. Because it reminds me every day that the solution isn't found in the promises of politicians. And not in the least. Kevin McCullough, AFR Talk, AFA Today. Today, speaking with Steve Deace, who's heard on some of these stations each evening, and we are grateful that he's here. We're talking about an issue that should be a simple one. In fact, Steve, before we went on the air, I'm here in a borrowed studio at the headquarters of Salem Communications in Camarillo, California today, and the editorial department is the ones that are hosting me. And one guy who's written some editorial for them for a long time, he comes by and goes, so what do you think of the 2016 race? He said, really, what do you think about Rand Paul in particular? And I said, I don't know why he's missing such a key opportunity to do something that's so simple. And he goes, what exactly? And I explained to him the whole story. And this is a man who has a doctorate in political science and public policy. He turns back to me and he goes, that's so dumb. He says it's so dumb. It would be so easy for him to just, even if he didn't mean it, to just come out and make a statement. Mm-hmm. The fact that they've dug in on this, Steve, to me talks about one of two things. Either it's hubris and they don't want to be held accountable by voters, by stinky, nasty voters that, are out there. And if so, then that's a bigger problem because now you have a set of ideas that may be forming around elitism, political elitism, which is usually a characteristic of the left. But if it's not that, if it's something else, if it's more sinister, if it's, well, we don't really want to take a stand on that because we're afraid that might hurt us, then that's an even bigger issue. But your response to my friend's reaction that was like, this is so dumb. It would be so simple.
He's exactly right. I mean, it had been so simple just to put out a statement right away and try to grandstand. Back in the good old days, we could at least count on Republican politicians to condescend us, Kevin. Those were the days. We could at least count on being patronized. Now we can't even count on that. And I think that, his father's coalition, I got to see it really good and up close in my home state because they really built it from the Iowa caucuses out nationally. And his father's coalition took over my state Republican Party, and they're some of the best friends that I have, great patriots. But there's a unique coalition here between Randian libertarians and Calvinists, what I used to call a coalition between Calvinists and anarchists. That's kind of his father's coalition. And even though they both want the same thing out of government, which is almost nothing, and to be left alone, they're both starting from dramatically different moral premises. And trying to maintain this conflict between your own coalition is very difficult. But this would seem to be the route of the issue to avoid all that, just to simply say, I don't care what the issue is. We have a government by the consent of the governed. We believe in the rule of law, the separation of powers. Every constitution, including the U.S. and every state constitution, says all legislative authority is in the hands of the will of the people via the legislative branch. Unelected judges don't have this authority, whether it's this issue or whether to pave a hole in your sidewalk. They don't have this authority. And I can't imagine, unless this is really just, some of these libertarians just hate the Christians as much as they hate the homosexual lobby or big government. So they think that we're just as big of a problem, so they've got no problem with government slapping us around a little bit. But if that's not the issue, then this ought to be an easy argument to make, an easy argument that grows your coalition and rallies people to your cause and gets people who might totally disagree whether the government ought to be in marriage at all to say, listen, that I agree with. No, there's no way we ought to be subjected to laws made by people we didn't elect. That's why we had a revolution. We don't believe in that. And
right.
This ought to be an easy case to make, and if he's not making it, or it's outside of his wherewithal, here's the thing I've told people for a long time, Kevin. I've had a chance to vet all these guys up close and personal because of where I live. And I tell people the same thing, and I'll share it with your audience right now. If you can't get them to do the right thing before they get elected when it's the most in their self-interest, then they'll never do it after they're elected when they're playing defense the entire time.
Absolutely.
Period. End of sentence.
Yep. No, absolutely. And that's why, friends, Lynn called from New Jersey and she was like, well, shouldn't we just throw him overboard? Because we know the fact that he's having to be coaxed into this. Well, this is part of the process. This is the part of the vetting. And if you don't take the simple stand when it's in your best interest to do so. I'm pretty well guaranteed, as Steve just said, you're not going to do that when it runs against your best interest. 888-589-8840 is my number. The number for the Rand Paul senatorial office in D.C., 202-224-3121. I'd still love to talk to some people that have talked to them on the line, 202-224-3121. If you get a busy signal, leave a message. Call back an hour later. Keep calling until you get a hold of somebody in person. Because that's the way they really start paying attention. Let's talk to let's go next to line 1. Will is calling from Georgia. Will, you're up next with Kevin McCullough and Steve Dace. Hi.
Hey guys, listening to you guys online, and you sound loud and clear. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Thank you.
Well, I think I see a big problem, and Steve can attest to this, especially some of the books that he's written, is that conservative Christians get played by politicians worse than any other group out there, and I think that's exactly what's happening with Rand Paul here, and it's disturbing to me because it seems like with Rand, he is trying to appeal to his legalized pot bunch, and he's trying to buy votes with hemp. And the other part of it too that's making it even worse for him, this past week, Matt Bevin, who was running against Mitch McConnell, was making legal arguments against gay marriage, and McConnell's camp has slammed him for doing that. And this loony judge here in Kentucky is a crony of Mitch McConnell. So hoping you guys can address that too.
Okay, well, good point. Steve, is it Mitch's bunch that's causing the problem here?
Yeah, Mitch McConnell's old attorney is this judge. This judge was nominated to the federal bench when McConnell recommended him to President Bush 41. So this is McConnell's former attorney, his former personal counsel that made this ruling. And I think this, again, just plays into what we're talking about here.
Yep.
And I completely agree with the caller from Georgia. We have swooned too often, like the women, the girls that swooned when the Beatles first showed up on the Ed Sullivan Show. We have swooned at politicians. I don't know of another job or industry in America, Kev, where the bosses show up and want to get a picture with their employees and ask their employees, hey, if you're not too busy, can I have some time with you? And we have treated these guys like they're matinee idols on the cover of Tiger Beat for too long.
Yeah.
It's time to start holding people accountable. What's happened here is the homosexual lobby is winning this fight. They have more courage of conviction. They draw blood. They take on casualties if they have to. They never give up ground. They don't call losing a little bit slower incrementalism. They refuse to compromise. They believe they have the moral high ground, and they fight accordingly. And human history has shown, Kevin, every war in human history has eventually been won by the side that believed the most in its own moral conviction. That is a fact of human history. We're losing this because they're fighting harder, tougher, and more principled than we are. And we don't owe Rand Paul or Ted Cruz or Mike Huckabee or Kevin McCullough or Steve Dace anything. It comes down to this. If you're going to do the right thing, we're with you. If you're not, wouldn't want to be you. It's just that simple. Yet for whatever reason, for Christians, we have a hard time doing that when the pagans are doing it just fine. And Jesus himself said the children of men are smarter than the children of light. Well, here's one area where we ought to take a page out of their playbook, if you ask me.
Well, and if you want to talk about taking a page out of their playbook, check out Steve's best-selling new pre-order available now. It's you can go on Amazon, go to stevedace.com, DEACE. But I think you'll catch the connection there, and it's a read you're going to want to know, because this will be the playbook for the years to come, and it's Steve's brand new work. Let me quickly take one more call. At least Kent is calling from Kentucky. Kent, welcome. This is going on in your state. You're a Kentucky voter. Your reaction to what we are talking about with your senator, who said he doesn't want judges messing around with the will of the people in the states, and yet when it happened in his state, he is in hiding. We can't find him. He won't come talk to us.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe he might be doing surgery on somebody's eyes right now or something like that, but I know I called his office, and like the lady said before, he's not taking any calls. He's got the answer machine answering, saying that the line is busy. And I tell you, it's disappointed, and like the gentleman pointed out earlier, you can kind of smell a rat whenever Mitch McConnell, he backs Mitch McConnell instead of Matt Bevin, who is supposed to be a fellow Tea Party member. And this is what happens. It's set up, and at some point, I have to wonder, at what point do we as people decide that, gosh, if 75% of us voted in favor of defensive marriage and a federal judge says, no, sorry, your law is no good, we're going to overturn it. At what point do we say, sorry, we don't want to believe in your laws anymore, and we're going to overturn you?
It's a good point. And thank you, Kent, for the call. Steve, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You said the cover of Teen Beat or Tiger Beat or whatever it was you said. These are our employees. We run small businesses. You run a small business. I run a small business. These are people that work for us. The sweat of our brow is what pays their salary. Food that comes off of my table at night is what keeps them doing their job in Washington, D.C. We have lost the reminder that that is the case, but in fact it is. And for the people of Kentucky, if they want to especially make their voice loud and clear, they need to be calling right now, 202-224-3121. But really, everyone should be calling, 202-224-3121, if you care about integrity in the presidential process. Steve, we've only got a few minutes, but I want to give you the chance to make one last kind of summation thought here before I put my exclamation mark on it.
Okay, let me encourage your audience, because we learned a big political lesson last year. And we learned that when we really want something, we can still make it happen. Or when we don't really want something, we can make it go away. The system conspired against us. They were all said to have our men and women go fight in Syria alongside Al-Qaeda. And we said no. And to Rand Paul's credit, he helped us with that fight at that time. Mm-hmm. We said no. We stood up to the system, the ruling class in both parties. They backed down. They wanted to shove Scamnesty down our throat. They wanted to do it last year. They tried to do it again this year. We stood up. We said no. We got our way. The system backed down. We can still get our way when we take a stand. The system will still work if we work it, but it will not work if we say a prayer to thank the Republican National Committee for our food on the table at night, if we treat Republican politicians like pastors or superstar pastors, and if we treat these people as anything other than our own employees, if we want self-government, then we have to be able to start governing ourselves.
Yep.
And we can make that happen when we want to. We have shown we can do it. It's just a matter of, do we have the consistent courage of conviction that, frankly, a movement that is based on paganism and isn't based on progressivism, but regressivism from moral barbarity we rejected centuries ago in Western civilization, they are simply outworking us, even though we've got them outnumbered 100-1. If we work with the same diligence they work, we will decimate their movement.
That's the voice of Steve Deace. Again, the number to call Senator Paul's office in D.C. is 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121. Kev, it sounds like you've got that number memorized. Yes, I use it all the time. You should memorize it. 202-224-3121. It's the switchboard at the Capitol, and it's your switchboard at your Capitol to talk to your representatives about what they're doing, both good or bad, when they're in office. Let me just, for a second, here at the end, take one more turn on this conversation, because, friends, if you've tuned in on Mondays all this year, you know that I'm talking about the solution in a way that I've never talked about it before. You know my frustration at the end of last year, saying, God, there's so many obstacles to overcome. We haven't begun to look at solutions being this desperate in a long time. And through a conversation with my very good friend, Pastor Jim Simbal at the Brooklyn Tabernacle, it became really clear that if we want to change our culture, we do everything that Steve and I have been talking about this last hour, but it's not the first thing we do. The first thing we do is to honor God. The first thing we do is to spend time with him. The first thing we do is we labor in prayer before him, at least to the degree of anxiety or anger we have about the issue. And so today's prayer focus, today would be the Prayer Monday. Pray 2014. If you haven't signed up, you'll get it in your inbox if you do. Pray 2014. But Pastor Simbala recently said this: is there something in your life that you want to change but can't? He says it won't change through effort. It will change only through your trust in Jesus, your dependence upon Jesus, your walk with Jesus, your communication, your prayer life with Jesus. See, here's the bottom line. We've all tried things that we thought would change our habits. But our habits, our heart attitudes, our attitudes towards others, our thoughts, our speech, otherwise, in this case, our impatience with the political process and the insistence that sometimes these just really dedicated sinners don't want to change. Relying on them is the mistake. We've already said that this hour multiple times. We can't do this ourselves. We need God to intervene in their life. So will you join me in this week of prayer, praying alongside of our friends at Brooklyn Tabernacle, praying alongside the listener to this broadcast, and thousands of believers through the world, in believing that God will enable us to change in the areas we need to change, but we need to ask Him to initiate it. We need to be praying for Rand Paul today. We need to pray that he would own up to what he needs to own up to, that he would step up, admit where he's blown it here, and if he's going to be committed to taking a different path, then make that clear. But at least step up. Friends, pray, then call, and then pray some more. Pray2014.com if you want to sign up for the Pray 2014 campaign. You'll get these in your inbox each Monday. Pray2014.com. 888-589-8840 to talk to me anytime during the show, but to call Washington, D.C. this afternoon, even while other people are on, Brian and others throughout the afternoon, call anyway, 202-224-3121. You get a message or you get a busy signal, call back later. Set an alarm on your clock to call back every hour on the hour until you get through. 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121. I'm Kevin McCullough. It's a brand new week, and we're off and running here on AFA Today on AFR Talk. We'll see you tomorrow.